Welcome to Barbershop Speaks. I'm Jefferson Noel, the founder of Barbershop Speaks. Our goal with this show is to have real, meaningful conversations about brotherhood, manhood, and fatherhood with the aim of strengthening the core of society. We're doing this in a space where we're comfortable and can just be our most authentic selves. It's a place where we can really talk and debate about the things that matter most to us. Today's show wouldn't be possible without the support of MIA Media Group, Amazon, and the Children's Trust. We're truly grateful for their sponsorship. Our topic today is all about the intersection of money and manhood. This chat picks up where our last episode left off. If you missed it, you can catch the full discussion on MIA Media Group's Facebook and LinkedIn pages. This conversation is crucial because, as we touched on the last time, there's a strong link between how men view themselves, their self-esteem, their identity as men, and their financial situation. I'm excited to dive even deeper into that. Today, we're challenging the narratives that have been handed down to us and confronting the unspoken truths about our financial lives. We'll uncover the obvious and not so obvious ways money impacts our manhood and talk about how we can come out on top. Let's chop it up. I'm glad to be here with a special guest, Hilmon Sorey. He is the co-founder of The Source. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm really glad you're here. So last time we had a conversation about the intersection of money and manhood.
Yeah.
And one of our guests, Brandon, he said something that was very interesting. He said that men believe that the more money that they have, the more of a man they think they are. So I think that's spot on. I'm not saying that's right. I just think that's what it is. So I'm curious to know, why do you think that is?
So you think that's what people think?
That's what a lot of men think.
So that's part of the problem, is the thinking is all programmed, right? So I think, yes, it's true that many of us do believe that the amount of money we have is kind of a way to quantify our manhood. And the reason that is because we're programmed that way. You know, if you take your phone and you open up Instagram, then the person who is perceived as a man is the one who's standing in front of the Aston Martin, who's down in Capri doing the thing, who's wearing the certain clothes and doing the certain thing and all of that. If you look at advertising on TV, they don't show the person who's going to work every day, doing what they can, going to church, raising their children, you know, putting them to sleep, laying next to their bed as they fall asleep when they're sick. They don't show that. They show the person getting into the Benz, person getting into, you know, whatever the car might be. So I think that in our society in particular, right, since this is where we live, that there is a huge focus intentionally, because we're in a capitalistic society, on consumption. And when that idea of consumption gets planted, and when all of the images that we see that the people who we are aspiring to interest, whether that's a love interest or aspiring to be, whether that's a maternal or a paternal interest or a family interest or even a community, when we see that as being that pillar, then of course we're going to identify with that. The challenge is, and this is why I asked the question about what we think, because a lot of times we get trapped between the ears and don't spend enough time in the soul. We don't spend enough time in the silence. We don't spend enough time really focusing on that thing that is not surface, that thing that is not pushed to us. So the distance that you can get from that, I think, is the greater that you can develop your own sense of what manhood truly means and what that translates to in the way that you traverse the world.
I got what you're saying. So do you feel as though using money as a measurement is unhealthy? Because you obviously believe that money is important, because you spend a lot of time in the entrepreneurial
spend a lot of
world.
money.
You spend a lot of money. So why do you think it's an unhealthy measurement, although having money is good?
I don't know that it's an unhealthy measurement. It is a measurement. It's a data point. Right? It is not the measurement. Right? So if you were to say, as a data point, how does money figure in? I think it figures in significantly, but it figures in to the degree that you allow it to, and that you assign it value, right? Money to me means power to a certain extent. It gets me access to rooms to be able to do things for my community, to be able to do things for my family, to be able to do the things that I find interesting. It means freedom to a certain extent. I'm a terrible employee. I can't work for somebody else. So I need to make enough money that I don't have to, right? I have a desire to see the world and to learn about history. That requires money. But if it's money for money's sake, if it's just for having a bunch of zeros sitting in the bank, that's not it. So the beauty in being able to kind of co-opt what money means to me is that I can find other means to get that currency. I can travel. I traveled for years without a dime because I had a job that sent me places. And that was fantastic because I knew that was something really important to me. Impact. I like the fact that having money or accruing money allows me to move things and to be in certain rooms and achieve certain things for the people who I feel important and the people who I feel charged with some responsibility to. But the impact usually transcends the dollar. The impact can come from a conversation like this. The impact can come from a book that I've written. The impact can come from a kind word to a friend or a phone call and reaching out just saying, I'm thinking about you. And when you begin to quantify those things, then money becomes a data point, but not the thing that defines your manhood.
So what did you do to shift that mindset? If you ever viewed money as the center of your life, clearly you have changed a lot since then. So what did you do to shift that mindset that the viewer watching this can do?
I lost a lot of money. No, I grew up, that is true, but I grew up in a place, the North Shore burbs of Chicago, where my parents had worked very hard. Both FAMU graduates had migrated up to Chicago, and both were the first Black people in their roles in their specific professions where we lived, right? My father was in hospital administration. My mother was a teacher and later got into teaching administration. We were fortunate enough to live in an area that was incredibly wealthy, though we were not. And I was positioned in this way where I would come home and my mother would say, you know, you have to act a certain way. You have to do a certain thing. These people are looking at you differently because of who you are. And I had a lot of that planted in me. And I'll say that there was an advantage to understanding that. And there was a huge burden, which made me believe it's the money. Because what else could it be? I mean, these are kids I grew up with. I grew up in this neighborhood. I didn't migrate up there. I lived there my entire life. So what's different? We drink the same water. We're wearing the same shoes. Did I say water? I did. We drink the same water. I'm wearing the same shoes. We're dressed in the same way. We're going to the same classes. I'm getting better grades than you. I'm actually faster than you on the court. You know what I mean? What is the thing? So I thought it had to be the money. So I grew up believing that this was the thing that I needed to achieve. And come hell or high water, it ended up not providing enough satisfaction and not shifting how I felt about myself. Most importantly, when I began to outpace where they were or catch up, didn't change anything. Still felt a certain level of inadequacy, still felt a certain level of like, you know, I don't belong with these people, all these other things. So I had to go deep and figure out what that was actually about. And I realized a lot of what I just shared, which is it wasn't about the money at all. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think it's important. Don't get me wrong. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm in a space where I work to help entrepreneurs to succeed and to grow their businesses. And I'm talking about money all day long. I think it's critical. It's just not end all be all.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, because you mentioned that you lost a lot of money and that was part of what changed your mindset. So what is a bad financial decision you made and how did it affect you?
You want the list?
Yeah.
How about the biggest poor financial decision? Can I give you that one?
Yeah.
I don't want to disparage any individual, but I will say that who you choose as your life partner is critically important to your financial well-being.
You're going to have to say that again.
Who you choose as your life partner is critically important to your financial well-being. And here's what I mean by that. You have to be aligned on the same goals. You have to be aligned on the same risk threshold. I'm an entrepreneur. I take a lot of risks. You cannot be my wife if you are not down for that. Right? Or if you are not willing to support some things while I go do these things that seem absolutely crazy, but I'm pretty certain they're going to win this time. You know what I mean? If my goal is to travel the world and be a little nomadic, then the desire to have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in the suburbs and just sit in it for 35 years ain't going to work. And these are two different means of managing your income or managing your wealth or deciding where you take risks and where you decide what you're going to do. So, and then there are people who also just grow up in a way where I did not grow up in a way. I was not fortunate enough. I did grow up in that neighborhood, but I was also kicked out of the house when I was 15 and I lived in a group home on the south side of Chicago. I got used to like waiting to pay the bill if I paid it until I got the pink note. You know what I mean? When I was 17, 18 years old and living out on my own. And so my threshold for creditors, for bill collection, for these sorts of things very, very high.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I made it this far. I'm gonna be all right, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
And there were times in my life when I was in relationships where that just was not the case. It's like it comes in, you pay it. You come in, you pay it. And I'm like, but what are we gonna eat?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So there are ways in which the person you choose to spend your life with can make or break your financial success. And I'll tell you another thing. You know, I have always wanted to build business. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that and be offered those types of opportunities. And
Mhm.
a lot of that comes from the fact that my wife is not a home at 6, have dinner on the table, you should be here, we decompress about the work, and then we watch some shows and go to bed at 9:30 kind of a person.
Mhm.
She understands that I might be out doing things. I might be out in a barbershop, even though I have no hair, but I swear I'm in a barbershop. You know what I mean? These sorts of
Yeah.
things are part of my life. And having a partner, and this goes both ways, obviously, you've got to have that same threshold and that same willingness to both partner and share and sacrifice toward an end goal. But that was my original sin.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the hardest thing to overcome.
Okay.
But overcome I did.
Yeah. And so, what is one strategy that you used to help out your financial situation? What did you do? A strategy that transformed that transformed where you are as in your financial standing.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm not a good employee, so I always knew wherever I was working was a short time thing,
Mhm.
meaning a couple of years. I can stick it, I can fake it long enough to get by.
Mhm.
But I've always been looking for opportunities for entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
So in doing so, I've invested in myself, whether that's in education, whether that's, you know, they call them side hustles now. I'm a little older than that. It used to just be like you were just moonlighting, they would call it, right?
Uh-huh.
But I will say that the thing that had the biggest impact on me financially was understanding. I think it's Nelson Rockefeller. Someone can Google this and figure out. I think it's Nelson Rockefeller, though, who said that I'd rather have 1% on the efforts of 100 people than 100% of my own. And when you think that through, 1% on the efforts of 100 people instead of 100% of your own, what I began to do in my consulting business is I began to take advisor equity in companies that I was working with instead of just taking the paycheck. So I'd take little cash, little equity, little cash, little equity. 100 plus something companies later, that turns into a lot of money when someone exits, when someone gets acquired, when someone IPOs, when someone does any of these other types of things that are liquidity events. And it gets you exposure to a lot of different things that you might be interested in. So it not only appealed to my interest and my desire to kind of do the little gambling that is part of an entrepreneur's kind of makeup, but also provided an economic vehicle. So the ability to kind of distribute and place numerous bets, I think, is critically important.
I love that.
Thank
So thank you, Hilmon, for those insightful words. And a big thanks to everyone here in the shop for being a part of the conversation. Before we go, let me add one more thought. Who you are today is a reflection of yesterday's efforts, and who you'll be tomorrow depends on the choices you make right now. And that applies directly to your financial situation as well. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, my co-host Ismail Joseph, founder and executive director of Student Life 101, will be with you. My name is Jefferson Noel, and
Well, welcome back. Welcome back. My name is Ismail Joseph, the host that you love most, and your choice for The Voice. That was a great opening segment with Jefferson and Hilmon. You know, we thoroughly enjoyed hearing all the gems dropped in that conversation, and I hope that you did too. You know, one takeaway for me is that when you're done learning, the L becomes silent. There's earning. In this segment, we're going to focus the scope more on the intersection of money and fatherhood. I'm glad to welcome back Mr. Yinka Majekodunmi, who is a licensed CPA and financial executive. He was here for our last show. We're glad to have him back. So let's chop it up. Yinka, welcome back.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here.
Pleasure having you. Pleasure having you. So now we're diving into this conversation about the intersection of money and manhood from a fatherhood perspective. We're going to start off with this question. What was one financial fallacy you had in your upbringing that you feared passing down to your children?
had a lot of fallacies, but but I think the easiest one that always comes to mind when people ask me this question is debt management and a bad relationship with credit card, because we think credit card is free money, right? Because of where we get it, and not understanding that got me in a lot of trouble when I was young. And so just understanding that paying 25% interest on a TV for Thanksgiving may not be the real rich.
A whole 25% interest.
Right. So how I use credit card, I think that's one of the things that I didn't want to pass down, because debt is one of our biggest erosion of wealth in our community.
Absolutely. And I think passing down this idea of legacy, and when we talk about legacy, we always talk about passing down money or generational wealth, as they call it, right? So from your professional and your personal experience, what is this generation teaching kids about money that is absolutely wrong, that you've seen and that you've experienced?
I mean, there's a lot of things being taught that's probably not being communicated the right way. And one of the things, I think in the earlier session we talked about it, the biggest misconception about wealth is that it could be generated and built fast. And that's the biggest misconception that this generation is having to face, because they get peppered with it probably multiple times a day, through media, through all sorts of media, TV media and social media. And so one of the things that you have to now establish for them is that there's no real expectation that they have to generate this wealth fast. I think that's some self-imposed objective that we have to find a way to dispel for them, to make them understand that it's a long game. And once you play long, you make less mistakes, because the most mistakes come from when you try to play fast. When you're trying to do something that should take 10 years, but you want to do it in 1 year or 1 month or 1 week. And so we try to dispel that relationship with money as a speedy process. It's a slow process. It's an intentional process. And one of the things I always talk about is understanding that money is a tool, not an identity. And so once you start reshaping that mentality that, okay, money is a tool and is not a form of identity, you start behaving a different way because you know what to use it for as a tool. I ask this question all the time when I meet with kids in colleges and talk to them. I ask two questions. I ask them, one, and this goes to adults too. One, how much do you really need to be comfortable? And I get numbers from 1 million
to what?
To 100 billion. And when I ask, what are you going to use money for? You get a list of all these purchases that they want to make. And that's not what money is about at the end of the day. Yeah, you could fulfill some needs, but it's going to get old real quick.
That brings me to this question. When you think in terms of your experience as a father, right? So oftentimes we teach our kids from a place of what we know. And sometimes we feel incompetent as fathers because we don't have that financial knowledge, right, on how to create and sustain generational wealth. And oftentimes I feel like sometimes we're not as transparent with our children with what we don't know about finances. So my question to you is, do you talk to your kids about your financial situation? Like, as you talked about debt management, you didn't always make the right decisions, like we all have not before, right? So do you talk to your kids about your specific financial situation, why or why not?
Yeah, it depends on the topic. I think it's a very delicate skill to balance, right? There's aspects of your life lessons that you could share with your kids, even in real time. If you make a mistake, there's things that you could, admit that this was a bad purchase, or this was a bad deal, so they could learn from it in real time. But also, you don't want to communicate too much of the burdens, because psychologically, it could pass down to them to feel as though they have a responsibility now. To make it right with you or for you. So you don't want to tip the scales that way. You want to make sure the lessons are being passed down, but not the psychological side of being responsible for you being passed down. I think that's the balance. So the real-time lessons, for sure, share it with them. Tell them what you did wrong. Tell them what you could have done differently. But you don't want to make them feel burdened, make them responsible for getting your financial situation right.
Yeah, that's so important. I recall having to deal with I won't say this particular child to remain nameless, but this child likes to, whenever we leave the house, he or she likes to use my money for purchases and things that they like to purchase. But I started charging them interest. Yes, I said, you don't have your wallet. Every time we go out, and you need to borrow my money, it's going to cost you 5 to 10% interest. So it makes them think about, what do I really need this particular purchase, right? And with that being said, people know how to make money. They know how to save money. They know how to spend money, but most of us don't know how to multiply it. So what is a financial tool you feel fathers, and even some of our mothers that are watching this particular show, that they can use to ensure that their children are set up well by the time they hit the ages of 18 or moving out the house and going into college?
I think it's always going to be the same answer, right?
Mhm.
How we do it is always going to be different, but the answer is going to be the same. You have to just start investing, Earth. And I'm saying that, I'm simplifying it, but the reality is that we know we can out earn ourselves if we overspend, right?
Yeah.
The battle is within. I think early stage of investing for your kids doesn't have to be anything grandiose. I think we over exaggerate how much you need. You have to put $1,000 a month up. It could be the most minimum amount you could afford and put it away. But also learn that gifts could also be investments for your kids, so they could build that relationship and comfort to know that it's a long game. And it's a delicate balance, but investing is the way to go. Whether you invest in yourself through education or your kids through education, whether you invest in assets, different type of assets, or you invest in a business. But the idea of investing should be the educational process from when they're small to when they get older.
So it's not necessarily the amount, but it's really the act of.
The act is the act.
And teaching them that from a young age.
So they could see it live.
I love that.
And they could walk the journey.
I love that. Here we go. Well, final question is this. If you can airdrop, and I don't like to use the word airdrop because I'm an Android guy and I have problems with Apple people. But if you can airdrop one piece of financial advice to the phones of all fathers in the world, what would that be?
Understand and know the number of your net worth. I think we've exaggerated wealth in the last 7 years. We've gone through cycles of trucking, LLCs, crypto, NFTs, entrepreneurship. But people still don't understand what that means. Now we're in insurance, right? So all these messages, what does that actually do to your net worth? You know what's crazy is that we talk about generational wealth, but we never talk about net worth calculation. So I think that's the message, is that understand your relationship with your net worth, so your decisions are either feeling it or taken away from it. We know our credit scores, right? We need to know our net worth.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, listen, thank you, Yinka, for the insight and the financial wisdom you've shared with fathers in our audience alike. There's one final thought I'd like to add. Don't give your children the benefits of success without giving them the ingredients that made you successful. Whether you felt like you've done a great job teaching your kids about financial literacy or not, don't be afraid to start over, because this time you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. When we come back, you're going to be with the founder, Jefferson Noel of Barbershop Speaks, and we'll see you brothers at the top because the bottom is way too crowded. Stay locked in.
My name is Jefferson Noel. Forward to seeing you on stage.
Thank you all so much. God bless you all.
Behavioral Services. We provide culturally sensitive mental health evaluations with thorough treatment plans, incorporating alternative forms of wellness, not just Western traditional medicine. Besides medication management and psychotherapy, we provide education to people in the areas of minority mental health with classes on your diet's impact on mood and sleep hygiene for better rest. We also offer weight loss therapy, massages, and facials. Visit brainlovehelp.com today.
Welcome back, and thank you, Ismail Joseph, for that amazing conversation. It was great having Hilmon Sorey and Yinka Majekodunmi join us today. We heard some powerful words from our guests. They said money isn't an unhealthy metric, it's just a data point. They also said who you choose as your life partner is crucially important to your financial well-being. And also, we talk about generational wealth, but you need to know your net worth. Listen, these conversations are incredibly important, and we want you to join us when we do conversations out in the community. Because as I mentioned in the last episode, Barbershop Speaks is more than a television show. We're an in-person community dedicated to connecting with you and making your lives better. To stay in the loop, scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen, follow us daily on Instagram, sign up for our newsletter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. In fact, we've got a live event coming up that we'd love for you to join. On Wednesday, September 10th, 2024, we'll be hosting a presidential debate watch party. Come join us to watch and discuss what we witnessed together. And this presidential election is going to be significant, with former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris as the main candidates. You're invited. Yes, you. Bring your spouse, your kids, whoever. Let's experience this moment together. Stay connected with us for more events like this and more great conversations. Once again, today's show is made possible thanks to Amazon and the Children's Trust. We're grateful for their sponsorship. And if you're interested in being a part of our live audience, send us a DM on Instagram. We'd love to have you be a part of the magic. And before we wrap up, I want to let you know this. I haven't met you yet, but I love you. Your community loves you, and God loves you. And never forget, your life has purpose, your life has worth, and your life has value. And never let anyone tell you that it doesn't. See you next time.